back in the studio. I said we have Jane Curtis with us, and we'll find out what kind of history material she has decided to drag up for us today, since she wouldn't tell me. Jane, when are you going to tell us?
It's not really so mysterious, but on this Halloween-y type morning, we're getting ready with a big wind and
That's
the
right.
leaves finally beginning to turn. Well, our subject is Minoan Crete, which might not mean something to everybody. But Crete, of course, we all know that's an island. In the Aegean Sea. And Minoan Crete, the Minoan age, was an early, second millennium BC and before. A very high civilization there, which might even have had connections with North America.
Oh, really?
So let us please see the first graphic here, which is a map showing where Crete is. Just refresh everybody's memory on that subject.
Do we have that map that we can
the first one.
There we go.
There it is. And you can see that, of course, the Mediterranean is the bright blue part, and you have Turkey coming in there. There's a Black Sea, and Turkey was also called Anatolia. The name of the region there was Anatolia. And then to the left of that, you see the blue thing. There's the Aegean Sea. And then as you've gone over, you've come to Italy and so on over there. And you can see North Africa in this picture, which is also going to be important in our story, or part of it. Now, Crete is the little island. See where North Africa kind of bumps up in the middle there. And above there, there's an island. And it's on the horizontal axis. And that is the island of Crete, which has been part of Greece for a long, long time. Greece, the peninsula goes up there to the left. So this is the general area that we're talking about. There has not been an awful lot of change geologically in the area since the BC.
Really?
I read somewhere that Crete had been there and in that form for over 1 million years. Now that seems like, I wonder if that could be a mistake.
It's unusual for that area that has been so...
Well, it is volcanic, and of course there was that one mighty blast one time, which we will figure in our story later on. But the general lie of the land there is like that. So as we talk about it, now you picture this island down here. Above it is the Aegean Sea with a lot of islands in it. And to the right of it, to the east of it, is what's now Turkey. Anatolia is the name of the area there, the peninsula. And then to the left of it, you have the mainland of Greece and so on, the Balkans going up. And now we're oriented down at the very bottom, North Africa. You can see the Nile Delta there to the right. And this suggests to you that maybe Crete was going to have been important in trade in the area, as indeed it was. Very central location. There have been people on Crete, people of one form or another, human beings of some kind, for, I read, 130,000 years that the earliest forms. Some of this may be correct, it may be not correct. At any rate, a long, long time. Carbon dating and other hints as to how old it might be we have a lot of sources on that subject. The people that live there, you say, well, how did people get out there if they've been like that for a long time? They are believed to have come down from Anatolia, from Turkey there. And their DNA has become a very important way of establishing some of these things. And coming down from that area, they're like sort of stepping stones in the Aegean. Down, they're islands, big enough ones. And if you've ever visited them, we had a wonderful trip through the islands one time.
Oh, really?
Rhodes is one of them. Rhodes is probably the most famous. There's Anad, Rhodes, Carpathos, and from each one you can see the next one. So people in very early days who weren't into oceanic voyages could very easily have migrated down to there. Let's see a picture. Next picture. This may be the most famous thing that people think of who know about Crete and the Minoans. This represents a bull, And to the left, you see a figure standing, holding its arms, kind of almost holding the horns of the bull. In the center is another figure, somersaulting over it, and somehow that picture I got cut off. Maybe when I sized it, I cut the end off. But at the end, there's another person standing there, and the reason that some are white and some are this kind of brick red, that's the way they differentiated between men and women in a lot of the pictures. The Egyptians did the same thing. They had a sort of earth color for men and then a lighter color for women.
So that's a woman vaulting over the bull.
Well, no, it's a man over the bull, but the woman is getting ready. See, this sport is still practiced in 1 or 2 places in the world. You grab the horns of the bull, you flung it, the bull would throw its head back instinctively, and you would flip with it, and you'd flip out and flip over, touch on the back of the bull, flip over and jump off the back on your feet. And this, they just kept doing this, like jump rope, one of their main sports and entertainments. The bull was also very important in most early Middle Age civilizations. You had 2 main things. You had a mother goddess, and you had this bull, this force symbol. Look at the next picture, please. And we'll see on this one.
There it is. That's almost reminiscent of an Indian
wasn't what I was expecting next. Yes, it is a fragment. The people, the civilization that developed on that island proved to be very artistic. Mm-hmm. Their taste was excellent. They were good at technical things. They very early on learned to smelt metal. Mm. You know how you did that. And there was a lot of copper up in Anatolia where they came from. They knew how to cut down trees, make charcoal fires, heat things very hot, melt the metal, and make things out of it. That was part of a picture. Go forward, please, to another picture, the next picture. This one is it looks like kind of a busty lady. Well, it shows the clothing of the day, the dress clothing. They had a filmy skirt-like thing, somewhat similar to what the Egyptians developed, a very lightweight material. They wore their hair in these long either hanging like this or plaited. The woman is carrying something. Go on to a next picture, please. And this is another example of their artistry. You can see that all of these things are painted. And to see the colors, the way the colors have lasted. And some of this is restored, but a lot of it was original because semi-protected from the weather. But you see there's another woman here, and she has it's shaped like a jug, but what that is a musical instrument. Mm-hmm. And to the left there you have a dove.
Well, now the picture before, the woman was white. This one is dark.
That's true.
Which
she
is interesting.
And I can't explain that to you.
So it must have been a very diverse society.
It could well have been, because in some of the old Egyptian things, they're not just dark, but actually black. Mm-hmm. So that indicates that everybody was not exactly the same. Mm-hmm. They all have a very ancient DNA, and they divide a little bit from the Greeks, but otherwise they're the same. Mm. So it explains why some of the same characteristics occurred. Mm-hmm. But a next picture, this is a so-called Octopus Vase, and this is quite a large one. They were great sea-loving and seafaring people, and you can see what led them into that from having seen where it's located. They're surrounded by water, but within reach of all these important things. Actually, I believe it was settled from the south to begin with. And that's interesting too, because we tend to think of the north side. Heraclion, when you go there from Greece, of course you go to the north coast. But the picture here, the octopus, they're intimately acquainted with the oceans and what was in them. We'll see a little more evidence of that. The pottery in general, they were able to make wonderful ceramics And these were found not only all over that area, that eastern end of the Mediterranean, the Greeks, Mycenae, Egypt, and the Levant, that whole eastern end of the Mediterranean, these things were found, indicating, of course, trade. They
Yes.
traded a great deal. They became great traders, and they learned, they developed ships. Of course, everything they had was either by rowing or by sail, or a combination. If we look again at the next picture, we can tell here that we could see another example of their civilization, of their life there. This is another true picture. This is not an artist's conception. These were restored, I think, and made directly from, they're not somebody's impression of it. This is a religious procession, or it might be simply a celebration. They were, I guess, a fun-loving people, but certainly artistic, gregarious. And this one you see, again, you see some music. At the end there, on the left side, you see somebody with rattles. This is a very ancient musical thing there. And then going forward,
A couple
you
of
see
flutes and a
yeah,
string.
those are actually panpipes.
Panpipes.
That's right. And then the stringed instrument. Well, there you are. And here they are wearing, their hair is hanging down, a lot of them. Some of it is taken of artistic, or stylish. Right. Stylish is a good word, I think, for them. One thing you don't see here is the extreme narrow waist. And I think we have another picture of the bull riders, the bull leapers coming up. But this is, well, this is sort of servant. But could we go back to the other one for a second, please? Yes. This one, what they did when children were very young, they put a ring around their waist.
Oh.
So that as they grew, this waist stayed very, very.
You can see that on the woman in the
You
right.
can see it in the front. And they look actually malformed sometimes when you see that. But a lot of the bull leaping pictures will show that very extremely, because they aren't wearing all this filmy stuff usually from that. Yeah, now this next one is also a sort of procession, but this is a servant serving, a cupbearer. They're also called cupbearers. But again, you see this a man. You can tell that this is a man because he's this brick red color. The men also wore long hair, but apparently not quite as long, or apparently not quite as fancily arranged as what the ladies had. And these colors, these beautiful colors, they had wonderful taste in that. And they lived in a beautiful island. It's wooded, it's hilly, heavily wooded, and with hills. When you drive through it, something like Greece. They aren't the Alps really, but they're big mountains. I guess more like ours, and with valleys in between. So a lot of dialects developed in the language, but also you had many different types of topography there. Now to go to another one. Here, this is of course
there
a
is, the
statue
bull vaulter.
made later, and this one is obviously a lady, and she has seized the horns of the bull, and the bull has reared up instinctively there, and then she has flipped, so she's standing with her hands on the bull's horns, and what she will be doing then is bouncing down on the bull's back and flipping over and landing on her feet at the other. And they must have
Like
started.
today's gymnasts on the what do they call it? The one that they do all these flips on.
Jungle gym? No, they don't do flips on that.
The gymnasts, yeah.
But it was a great sport there. It was their main sport, of course. Now, obviously, everybody couldn't do this.
Right.
And obviously, you must start very young to learn to do that. I think it would be awfully hard as an adult to just get up the sheer strength, because you'd have to jump up somewhat to the horns of the bull. But they also, as I say, worship the bull and the mother goddess, and bull symbols are around in many places. Another picture will show us another aspect. And this is their language. This was taken to be, I don't think there's any disagreement among scholars, that this was really the first organized language and written down language. The only rival might be in Mesopotamia, because they got going pretty early too. And some say the Indus Valley, even farther east, did, because it's where Sanskrit came from. But the overlapping times are hard to determine here because there's so much disagreement. Now this one, if we can look at it, can we look at it up close a little bit? Can we do that? You'll see, I don't know if we can or not, it might be already maximum, but you can see there are like scratches on there. This is a fragment from an inscription of what's known as the Linear A language. And you can see they're like scratches, but they mean something. They're more like hieroglyphics in a way, but not organized syntactically the way the Egyptians did. But in this one, we still have not read them completely. Now, they've read what they believe to be some names on that. And one of the important names would be Knossos, who was one of the very early, maybe 3rd, 4th century BC, or millennium BC, 3000s, 4000. Whose name was Minos, and he had given, it was from his name that they took the Minoan in describing this great upsurge and this thriving of culture there. So one more quick look of that, and then you can again see the scratches, and clearly these were made by some kind of a tool. They were great on tools. And now the next one will show you a tablet. This will remind you possibly of some of the Inca things you've seen. Yeah, let's go to the next one. They came out, this is circular. It starts, and you read it going in
around.
Yeah, you go round and round in the pattern. And this, if we can zero in a little more on, you will see that it's far more sophisticated. There are more fine lines, more delicate things in it. And the fact that it progresses, the other one almost just looks like random scratches out in left field, but this one progresses. And this was finally read by a very young man. He was a student, and he was enthralled with it. And one day, somehow, a good fairy put into his head the idea, what if this is just ancient Greek written in these different characters, earlier, before the other one developed? What if it's that? And when we think of, for instance, if you were to write English in Russian characters, wouldn't make any sense to you if you're used to reading Russian, but it certainly would if you knew both. Well, to make a long story short, that proved to be what it was. And imagine evolving this thing in the 2nd or 3rd or 4th millennium BC, when there wasn't a lot of help. There weren't a lot of, you couldn't go to the computer and say, find me everything that has accent on the third. So, no, you couldn't do that. So in this one, now unfortunately he was killed in an accident. His name was Ventris, and he's still very highly regarded. Now a lot of these things that we have, of course, nobody knew about them at all. But in the late 1800s, Sir Arthur Evans came on the scene, and he began discovering a lot of this. He started doing archaeology, and he really set the ball rolling. And Arthur Evans did a lot of the spade work for that. And there aren't all that many Cretan things that were stolen and taken to other countries, like Berlin and London and Paris. But these were found and were, as I say, in the fullness of time, then they were deciphered and gave us great respect for.
I can imagine,
yeah. Now, of course, they not only evolved this, they had multi-story buildings, successful ones. They early knew how to mine metal. They knew what it was. Chunks of copper, they would find chunks of copper, I guess, mined very easily apparently in Anatolia then, and do something with it, and then do something with that and build ships. And to make the ships, you had to have wood and you had to have tools. And I read one thing by a former British Navy officer who said that tools had to have very well refined, professionally refined, and cut, and to have edges, and which would mean that you have to be sure that your knife came out with a very sharp blade, and so they figured all that out. Now, so they had a language. They were amongst the first. They were, as I say, early in the shipbuilding and navigating. So I've seen reports, only two different sources, that they actually could determine longitude. And if the rest of this theory that we'll mention later is true, they clearly knew longitude. Latitude was no problem really, observing the sun, but longitude was. Now, going on from the languages, let's see what we have. Now, this is a general view of one corner of the ruins of the palace at Knossos. Knossos was the main thing. They're called palaces. You can see the multi-story nature of it. And you can see these beautiful, like columned outdoor exterior corridors. And inside there on those walls were gorgeous mosaics painted. And some of them are still there. And the bright red color, very distinctive, Cretan red color, was there in many things. In the distance, you see others over there. There's some, the lower columns survived and others didn't. We have another couple pictures of just these general ruins. And you can see the trees around them, beautiful area. Go to the next picture, please. Here's another one. And I think that column was probably a reconstructed one. The other one must have been crumbling. But you can see that there's a painting in there. I suppose it would be something like the way we have pictures in the halls here.
Right.
They just have decorated things. They had style, as I say. They seem to have taste. They did have occasional earthquakes. As you mentioned, the area is not totally calm volcanically. And they had a huge one. There was evidence of that, I don't know, a couple hundred years maybe before this really got going, which was in the 3000s, 4000s, was when it really, at 5000s even. So you see a lot of that sitting around. And a third one to show you what the area was like, the ruins were like, covering it. One more picture, please. Yeah, now here's a neat corner. The buildings were closed in largely, and they went from some very high platforms and the stairs. I should have shown one of the staircases because I think it was one sideways there. They're a lot like the things that were found in Mexico in the Aztecs, and where there were those huge mounds and then the staircase built into the mound. Well, there were things like that. Now, here you can see also that you could go downstairs, and when you went downstairs in subterranean areas, you found things like the throne room, for example. Nicely done, good-sized throne room. The throne was a beautiful thing made of gold and gypsum. There had a lot of gypsum around, which is sparkly. They like tinsel, it looks like, or at least at one period they did. The throne room had this lovely throne, and you could see decorations all around it. A lot of the decorations were of a double-bladed axe. It's known as a labyrinth, L-A-B-R-Y-T-H in Greek. And this, for one reason or another, was another important symbol that they had there, in addition to the bull and your mother goddess things going on from that. The labyrinth and the fact that these palaces were complex and inside, multi-story, they had underground things where it would have been dark. They also had bathrooms in our sense of the word, not just baths, but toilets that flushed. And it wasn't until 1775 that somebody patented the first one in Europe.
Right.
So they really were advanced there. But the complicated nature of the buildings inside. And this labyrinth, this symbol and so on, gave rise to the word labyrinth. And there were, at one time, Minoan Crete ruled over the colonies on mainland, Greece in other words, and other places. But in Greece, and it is, they think maybe young people were sent from Athens, the nobles down there, to grow up at the court, to be raised at the court in Knossos, the way in medieval times. Young people, particularly the boys that were going to become knights, were sent to be raised by some famous person. And this all, you can make a very good case that that's what gave rise to the myth of the Minotaur, the bull cult, and the involved structures, and the double-headed axe and so on, symbol. So that's a nice little bit of, I guess, anthropological history from that. But seeing where these things were placed, in just a minute we will look at this again. This map, this is another map, but don't go away with that map. We'll look at that again because we're going to see the effect that this civilization, now these palaces were all over Crete. The remains of another one at Phaistos on the southern shore and other remains, but the one at what's now Heraklion, this is the one called Knossos, is the biggest, most central, most important. They are believed to have been very fancy storage points because their trade grew so great with other countries that they were importing and exporting jars of oil and jars of wine, jars of all sorts of things, and remains thereof were found not only on Crete, but all around them. So they were engaged in a brisk trade. Now that map that we want to look at again, this shows you there's Crete in the middle there, and you see lines stretching out. This contrast is not as good as our other map was, but you can see the red lines. Now they imported, they went off to Cyprus. You see Cyprus on the right there in the Mediterranean, kind of pointing up to the shore. A lot of copper on Cyprus, and I think some tin as well. So they traded, did hefty trade there, and had settlements, but they never moved their whole show down there. But here's down here to the Nile Delta. They traded with Egypt, and you see the influence of their art on Egyptian art of the period. Then you see, because they have other, they went clear to the east. Remnants are found there in Spain even, and of course up all around Italy. And the things they were trading, what it says on these, I don't know if you can read it or not, but it indicates some of the main products that were traded. And it's really amazing. Well, now the theory that this ex-naval officer had sounds very wild at first glance. But the theory is that they had, maybe not worldwide, but certainly cross-Atlantic trade going. They were exhausting all of the wood, and indeed it's true. Spain was wooded, Anatolia was wooded, and it's gone. And the great forest could never come back. But they did that in order to keep being able to smelt. Their ore did not run out, but their wood did for heating it. And that was the only way they had, of course. So they were constantly trying to find other places where they could get it. Now the ocean currents would take you over across the Atlantic if you hit them right. So the theory is not totally wild, but yeah, here you see they got very far east in the Mediterranean, so they ventured out of the Mediterranean. And as I say, if they hit them right, the theory is quite possible that they went over to the New World, that they discovered the North American continent and the Mississippi. Of course, they're coming at it, well, they were from the south anyway, went up the Mississippi. Somehow they knew how to play winds and currents so that they could sail into the wind. Other countries couldn't do that for centuries. They knew how to do that.
We are unfortunately down to our last minute.
Oh dear.
Yes.
Well, the key piece of evidence for the fact that they were importing copper from our Lake Superior region
Really?
is, now I haven't double checked this with scientists, but in my sources tell me, one of them tells me anyway, that analyzing the copper, you can tell pretty well where it came from, any ore, and that the only two places in the world that have the copper that shows up in theirs are their own area, Anatolia, the Mediterranean, and the United States of America up around Lake Superior, which is rise for thought. Well, now I think we had just a couple more pictures we'll riffle through quickly. Yeah, these are some of the huge jars in which they transport, and they're decorated. You know, it's like decorating the back of your sofa. Well, nobody's going to see it, but decorated. Just flip now. Go to the next, and we'll see. Fishing was an enormous trade. Cool. And this is not only a man; he's a bright red one. He's out fishing, exporting that. So they make it such beautiful drawings. Let's go again. This is saffron, which is even today a very rare and delicate commodity. They had some kind of crocus that has it. Here were some of their ships. They look sort of like gondolas. They had a keel, which was very unusual earlier. The Egyptians never used keels, but it was boarded over a keel, and they used a mast, and they must have had, as you can see, there's sort of on the left there's a little structure, and that's where the person stood, the coxswains that were, the person stood, was directing it. There's one in a museum, constructed, beautifully constructed. The wood planks beautifully put together, and there is a seal. They're still finding those seals from seal rings. This is a tiny thing, but they did tiny, tiny, beautiful work, and they came in different colors. But here's a ship on a seal, and this last one shows some workers carrying products. They just imported some of these things. There's some animals you see there, but beautifully made. So there was a very important civilization down there.
There certainly was.
And it might even have had a personal touch with our continent.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm glad you didn't tell us ahead of time. That was fascinating.
Surprise.
Okay, let's